Hi everyone, my name is Isaac Quinones and I'm here to talk to you about Greece. Specifically, I will be focusing on the effect the rule of the Ottoman Empire had on the food culture in Greece. So here's a brief history in the Ottoman Empire. It began around the year 1300 by a Turkmen chief called Osman, who founded the dynasty in Western Anatolia, that is east of Constantinople. He was succeeded by his son Orhan and his grandson Murad. After a long legacy of successors, around the year 1450, his group took over Constantinople, and by the year 1550, they have totally taken over Greece and many other surrounding parts of the Mediterranean. Suleiman the Magnificent's reign was known as the height of power because he had a very successful military conquest throughout his 45-year reign, and beyond him, the empire started to lose grounds, probably a result of globalization and advanced firearms and just generally an inability to maintain such power. So by the year 1923, after World War I, they had to relinquish a lot of their territory. By the turn of the 20th century, the Young Turks, a nationalist movement, has revolted over the authoritarian regime of the Sultan Abdul Hamid. And by 1922, the Sultanate was abolished and the Ottoman Empire became the Turkish Republic. So it began with Osman in the year 1300, it peaked with Suleiman, and it ended in 1923 with World War I. Bruh. So how was life for the Greeks? Under the rule of the Ottoman Empire, from the years 1430 to 1821, Greece was divided into administrative units called sanjaks and voyevods, and it was divided into districts that were governed by Ottoman officials. The main takeaway is that they were segregated, and Greek Orthodox Christians, which were a large part of the demographic, were considered second-class citizens. Muslim Turks became first class, and Jewish people and other minorities were like a third. They didn't have civil rights, so there was a lot of forced labor or forced conscription. This page on Wikipedia here says it pretty well. It's called the dhimmi system. They were given rights such as the right to worship, but were treated as second class. Christians and Jews were not considered equals to Muslims. Testimonies against Muslims by Christians and Jews were not admissible in a court of law. Christians and Jews were not allowed to carry weapons or ride on horses. Christians or Jews could not have houses that overlook Muslim houses, and their religious practices would have to defer to those of Muslims. And there's other legal limitations. So things were not stacked up in favor of non-Muslims. So why is this important? This allows us to understand that Greece was able to maintain a notably distinct cultural background from the Ottoman Empire due to the occupancy, religious difference, and national identity, despite having relatively close geographical proximity and influence over time. So now let's just get into the point of food. So before, Greek food during the Middle Ages for peasants consisted of simple grains and plants. Their diet consisted mainly of bread baked from barley, vegetable soup because they grew onion, garlic, cabbage, legume, lentils, and chickpeas, which were able to make a different type of soup like lentil soup. This was called fakes. They included spices like vinegar, salt, maybe pepper. They drank cheese from the milk of goats and sheep, and they had a lot of access to olives and olive oil. They also had access to fruits and nuts like figs, grapes, apples, and walnuts. Off the coast, people would eat fish like anchovies or sardines. They'd go fishing, and typically people would drink wine because it was cheaper than clean water sometimes. After Ottoman occupancy extended trade routes across the Middle East that introduced access to rice and more access to livestock like lamb, cows, chicken, and sheep. This can be tallied up to globalization though. So now let's focus on foods that are specifically originated from this region and time period. So what if we took grapes in a slab of meat and we got rid of the grapes? And if we mashed the meat onto the leaves, we would get dolmades. This is a bit simplified, but this is essentially the creation process of this food. It's a popular appetizer in Greece today. Essentially, it's a lettuce wrap of rice, nuts, herbs, and minced meat. I've never personally had this one, but it looks pretty good. It looks a bit like sushi. You know what else resembles an internationally recognized food? Moussaka. This is a meat pie typically made from eggplants, lamb, and beef. It usually has layers, and here's some more photos. I made sure to compare the Greek version to the Turkish, but there's a lot of overlap. It looks familiar.
Want some lasagna?
So this is baklava, the food, not the face mask, and it consists of like a thin wafer material that is soaked in honey and filled with broken up walnuts and sometimes pistachios. This dessert isn't exclusive to the Ottoman Empire. It got spread to the general Mediterranean area over time, but it is a common staple in Greek and Turkish food culture. The next food I want to talk to you guys about is lokumades. This is a dessert. It looks like donut balls. I think this food is an honorable mention because it has existed in Greece for a while before the Ottoman occupation, but it has been popularized and incorporated into Turkish food culture, kind of like the other way around compared to the other things in this video. It's a deep fried donut covered in honey and sesame seeds, and I've gotten to try it once and it's pretty good. Another honorable mention I wanted to make was about coffee. If you've ever seen this video, you wouldn't be surprised to know that the Greeks used the same method to prepare coffee. Look at these distinctively Greek video. I'm joking about the little Greek flags, but this is really like so the biggest part of this presentation is to talk about the biggest contribution, the biggest export in food cuisine that this region of the world has provided: the kebab. So here's an example of a classic kebab that you've probably eaten before. It's got pepper, mushroom, onions, and lamb. Here's something that is called a kebab, doesn't technically count. I think this is some form of juxtaposition because it seems to be missing the point. Here's a kebab that is skewered on an eggplant. Here's a kebab skewered on wood. Here's a kebab skewered on metal. And here's one skewered on a knife. In general, the concept of skewered meat was introduced to Greece during the Ottoman rule, and today it's a common street food. You can see these being sold all over the place, everywhere, even here in America, California. Now, these are all great, but the most famous kebab is the doner kebab. This is the doner kebab. Look at that. It's a massive hunk of meat on a stick. And here's the process of how they make it. Foods in between the layers, and the end result just looks just really good. So what does that leave us with in this modern era? Globalization and this culture has enabled mass exports of gyros. This affects everyone because as a result of globalization and this culture that is cultivated over 400 years, this has led to a massive export of this region of the country to be gyros. And this could sound kind of like a joke, but I really do mean this, affects anybody today because you have access to this food that previously just wasn't there. I think this image from Arby's kind of represents this pretty well because it is an image of consumerism on its face, but it really does show the influence and the power of the Ottoman Empire on Greece. So I just want to say